special guest. He is with the Macer VFW, 11499. I'm the current commander, and Wilbur has been with the post ever since its inception in 1995, I believe it was.
94.
94. And he is an integral part of our organization. He helps a lot, and he is just a wealth of knowledge, and you guys are very fortunate that he is going to be here today to talk to you about World War II. He's been having a little problem with his voice, so if his voice gives out, I'll have to kind of take over, and we'll do questions or something like that. But so if you give your undivided attention to Mr. Grisham, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Good morning, kids.
Good morning.
My name in the Army was Clyde Wilbur Grisham, 1703029. That number stayed there pretty fast. Back in 1941, I graduated from Macer High School. 18 years old. Is there any 11-year-old kids in here? See, I was only 7 years older than you are. I joined the Army. They sent me to Jefferson Barracks, Missouri for induction. There I received my uniform just like the one I have on. I went from there to Camp Grande, Illinois for training in the medical corps. Now, the Army has infantry, artillery, different units. Mine was the medical corps. We were the ones who were assigned to take care of those injured on the battlefield. The training consisted of crawling around under barbed wire, carrying men on my back who had supposedly been injured, treating them, getting them off the battlefield, and getting them to a place where they could be treated. 13 weeks of that, we practiced on the field, being shot at over our heads, and had to perform all of our duties in that manner. When I got through training, what happens? The Army never works like it's supposed to. There were no openings for medical aid men, and that's what my training was. I was to be a company aid man with an infantry outfit. No openings, so I was sent to a hospital, became a ward boy, carrying bedpans, taking blood pressures, temperatures, and so forth. That was in November of 1941. Okay, what happened on December 7th, 1941? Yes, Pearl Harbor. The 8th of December, I was automatically transferred from the hospital to the 22nd Station Hospital, which was my home outfit. The 22nd Station at that time was assigned to the Philippine Islands. We were supposed to have left the 24th of December, headed for the Philippines. We didn't make it. We didn't get out of Camp Hewlin until February of 1942. By doing that, I escaped the Bataan Death March. They tell me there's something like 14,000 men killed in that death march. That's a lot of men. Anyway, we were halfway there when they turned the boat around. We came back to the island of Maui. Anybody been on Maui? You have been there? What'd you think of it? Beautiful place. When we landed there, it was a sugarcane field and a pineapple plantation taken care of by Portuguese labor. There was no hotels, there was no beach, there was no fancy stuff. It was the first island next to the Japanese. They were in the Marshall Chains to the west of it. Okay, we sat there for 2 years, didn't move anything. It took 2 years for the people back here in this part of the country to build up enough stuff for us to use to begin advancing. Our first advance was the 4th Marine Division on the Roy Namur Island. They went to Roy Namur, took it. It was a 4-day operation. It was a fairly small island. And when they came back from Roy Namur, each one of them had their mess kits. Got on the ship, about halfway home. Home was the island of Maui to them at that time. They used these, dipped them in a tub of water, in the next tub, then rinse water, then kept them for the next meal. Just so happens that the sanitation apparently wasn't too good. Can you imagine a boatload, probably 24,000 men with dysentery? That's what they contracted from using the dirty mess kit. That was rather a rude awakening to an outfit who had been sitting there for 2 years doing nothing. Okay, we finally got that taken care of. Then their next invasion was the island of Guam, the island of Saipan. What happened on the island of Saipan? Any of you know what happened there? That was the home base of the Enola Gay. The reason we went out to take those islands was we were advancing on the Japanese mainland at that time with our enemy. The Enola Gay was the one that dropped the atomic bomb. Well, by us advancing, taking the islands as we did, we got close enough we could use the bomber to bomb Japan. The next island after Saipan was one of the most bloodiest battles in the World War II. That was the island of Iwo Jima. So each time the staff would decide which island we had to take next in order to get closer to Japan. Okay, Iwo Jima was supposed to have been a very short, maybe week battle, something like that. It lasted 36 days, and it took 3 Marine divisions to finally move or kill the Japanese, which is what we were doing. The Japanese did not give up. They fought to surrender. They had been taught to give their life for the emperor, whatever it took. And if they were cornered and couldn't continue fighting, they were told that they were supposed to kill themselves, commit hara-kiri. Most of the islands, they would push them back, keep pushing them back, and at the last, the Japanese would mount their bayonets, put the rifles at the charge, and take off into the American lines. Some of those kamikaze or banzai attacks got pretty bloody because they got down to hand-to-hand fighting. Since I was in the medical corps, I did not do any fighting. I carried what we called a Geneva Convention card. I still have mine. This card in my pocket was supposed to prevent the enemy from making me do anything other than medical work. It didn't work that way. The Japanese didn't honor the Geneva Convention. In combat, we wore a helmet with a red cross on the front and a red cross around our right sleeve. That was supposed to protect us or keep us from being shot at by the enemy. It turned out in the Japanese that was at a target. They shot at those red crosses because we were the people that were taking care of the men and putting them back into action to fight again against them. So their orders were to shoot to kill if they saw a medical man. Then, just before the Battle of Iwo Jima, we were all prepared, my outfit, prepared for the invasion. We were issued rifles and given instructions on how to clean them and put them back together. I cleaned that rifle for 3 days, scrubbing cosmoline out of it. That's pretty strong stuff. It's probably Phil back there probably came across some cosmoline at times. It's in all the working parts of it, and you had to take it apart and scrub it with a brush and get it all clean and put it back together. We got those rifles ready, And the day before we were to go out on the range and fire, the loadmaster for the convoy came by and said, "Hey, wait a minute. I only have space for a 250-bed hospital. You got more than that stuff around here. How big a hospital are you?" At that time, we were a 750-bed hospital, so we had too much equipment. They took another hospital from the replacement depot and took our place. And the result was that I'm here before you today. If I had been in the 22nd and in invasion of Iwo Jima, I probably wouldn't be alive, or I would have been injured very badly. The invasion, you have any idea what an invasion is like? Well, that's what they do. They decide what island they're going to take. Then they start gathering the equipment together, and once they get it all together, the first thing is the destroyers, that's the smaller ships, go out next to the beach where they're going to land and start shooting. Behind them is the cruisers. They're bigger boats. They shoot a bigger shell. Behind them, out about 20 miles, is the battleships. They start shooting. And for 3 days before the invasion, all those guns are shooting at the island, trying to make sure the Japanese keep their head down. The invasion force then gets off of the boat, climbs down the net into the little landing boats that they have, pull away, and they start circling until the order is given to land. The first wave then goes in and lands, usually a rifle company, which lands, moves up away from the beach. Then the next wave comes in, supplies. Third wave, we were supposed to have been on the 9th wave. Okay, the hospital that took our place was aboard those little landing ships out there, going around and around in a circle, waiting for their turn to land. Orders got messed up. They landed on the 3rd wave. The 3rd wave was the one the Japanese usually opened up on. That hospital had 80-some% casualties, provided no medical aid. All their people were either injured or killed. The only medical care the island was available for the island was the fact they sent a boat back to Guam, picked up all the medical people that were available on Guam, rushed them back up to Iwo Jima, and that was their medical provision. Our outfit being stationed back behind the lines, it was usually a week to 2 weeks before we got any casualties. We would know how the battle was progressing by the amount and number of casualties we got. I'm losing it. A little better. Okay. Then after Iwo Jima, the next battle was the island of Okinawa. Now that's the first piece of home ground that the Japanese had to fight for. And that was a bloody battle. It lasted quite some time. I don't remember the number of days, but it was a bloody, long battle. It was a long island, and at the south end was a steep cliff. The people were backed up, the Japanese and their people were backed up against that cliff. And instead of surrendering, they jumped off. Many of them were killed by just jumping off the cliff. Our people got in and picked up what they could, treated the injuries. Then comes the big question. We were preparing for the invasion of the homeland of Japan. At that time, they were getting 5 million men ready for the invasion of Japan. The expectation was that the casualty count would run 3 million or better. That's a lot of patients to treat. So every island in the Central Pacific had a general hospital with 1,200 beds, at least 2 station hospitals with 750 to 1,000 beds, That's a lot of hospital space. So along comes Uncle Harry, says, go ahead and drop the atomic bomb. And the first one was dropped on Hiroshima. You've all heard of that. Then the second one was dropped on Nagasaki. That persuaded the Japanese to surrender. It saved a lot of lives doing that. There's a lot of people say we shouldn't have dropped the bomb. Probably not. If we had gone along and invaded Japan, how many would we lost? How many of them would he killed? Actually, there were more Japanese killed by the firebomb raids of Tokyo and the northern islands than there were killed by the atomic bomb. So you don't hear too much about that. The firebomb raids was the 29s would go across, they'd stick bomb, carpet bomb, as you call it, just drop their load and move on off. And there would be maybe 20, 25 planes in a bombing raid that they dropped the firebombs on. Tokyo was pretty well burned out by the end of the war. So after that, how many years do you think I left or I was away from home? Try 4. I left home July 28th of 1942, and I saw home in May of 1945. I received no passes. Our outfit was basically under the same situation. There's out of, 250 men. The only ones that got back to the States were those that applied for OCS. And just so happens that when we first landed on the island, there was 4 men in the registrar's office. I was one in the kitchen doing KP, and the man comes, taps me on the shoulder and says, "Hey, I see in your records you run a typewriter." I said, "Right. In high school, I had 2 years of typing." He said, "We need a typist in the registrar's office. Go change your clothes and go report to the registrar's office right away." I did, and for 4 years then I wore this type of uniform. This is a Class A uniform of World War II time. My rank, my overseas bars, my 1 stripe for service. This one is the outfit that I was assigned to originally. This was the outfit that I left when I came home. Other than that, I don't have too much. You got any questions? Anyone here? My voice is about to go on me. Anybody got a question? I'll try and answer it. How many battles was I in? I get to count 1 battle. I didn't participate in any of the action, but at the Battle Midway, they thought the Japanese was going to take the Hawaiian Islands. That's what they thought was coming up. The Battle Midway occurred north of us on the island of Midway. Basically, it was a naval battle rather than the Army. The Navy managed to capture the Japanese fleet out there. They had 5 major aircraft carriers that they either lost or damaged in that battle. They figured that set the Japanese way back, that they had lost their major attack fleet by doing that. Originally they thought they were coming into the Hawaiian Islands, and that Maui being not the primary island of where the troops were stationed, they were most of them on Oahu, where Pearl Harbor was. We were in the secondary island, out a little bit bigger than Maui, but Oahu. It had a landing base, and that's what they figured they were coming for. So for 3 days before they even knew where they were, we had to wear our battle gear, helmet, gas mask, the whole 9 yards, you might say. Then, after the battle, we were finally given the all-clear sign. Then, because of that, then I can claim 1 star on my ribbon on my chest. I don't have it on this one, I lost it, but I am entitled to 1 battle star because of that. Although we did not fire a shot we were considered in the action and therefore allowed to wear a battle star.
You want to tell about that picture right there? You want to tell about that picture?
Okay, yes. See these stars? This is the wall of memory in the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. Each one of these stars represents 100 men. There are 4,000 stars on that wall. That represents the men that were killed in World War II. That, to me, I stood in front of that, shed a few tears. It is rather awesome just to stand there and look at that. But think, all those kids that were killed primarily under the age of 25. What would the country been like if we'd had that brain power? If we had been able to utilize that brain power? That's what we lost. Okay, I want to show you something here.
You need to take a rest, Wilbur. You need to rest your voice.
Oh, just a minute. This is what we called our traveling suitcase. Each one of us carried 2 of these. This one, as you can see, has a blackout number on the back. That is the Manila, Philippine Islands depot number. We were not supposed to know exactly where we were going. When we got on the ship, we were not told. Later did we find out. When the ship was turned around and sent back to Honolulu, these bags were left on the ship, and the one that we carried had our own personal gear in it. This had our extra supplies. So in order to keep us from knowing where we were going, they painted the numbers out. We got these about a month after we landed on the island of Maui. This was carried all of our blankets, our extra shoes, shirts, uniforms, whatever was in that bag. This carried our personal gear and was strapped to our backs with a strap that went under our shoulder across there, and then this hung on our back with our personal gear in it. I'm about gone.
If you want to take a rest, I can take
You better take over for a minute.
I moved it. I didn't want you to get your papers wet.
You probably can't even hear.
Last time we met, you got a chance to interact with Steve McCallum, and he was a Vietnam vet, infantry, 101st Airborne. And are there any questions? You might have thought some questions after he left or a couple days later. Are there any questions? I'm also a Vietnam vet, and I will answer any questions I can. Wilbur's voice has just run out, so
He'll come back.
I wish we could go into this more, but maybe we could show the pictures and
Yeah, I have the pictures.
just go ahead and show you the pictures. If you have any particular questions, I know.
As he makes his turn on one end, you lay the reef and step back. He's coming right along. You salute, step back, and when you step back, he's walking in front of you. They keep that 21 gun. They keep that man walking 21 steps across there at all times. Here recently, there was an article about a rainstorm or snowstorm or something like that, and they were asked them if they wanted to not do it. They said, forget it. We continue to walk in the snow and in the rain, the ice and whatever. They continue. There's always one man walking in front of that tomb. That
was probably during the hurricane last year or 2 years ago, I imagine.
This is those pictures were taken on the Kansas Honor Flight. You've probably heard of that. I made that a year ago, and that is rather awesome. And the feeling of walking across in front of that tomb is something that every child should get to field, but probably never will. The chances are very slim of anyone getting across that, to walk across it or to stand in front of that tomb. It is something else.
I just have about 3 of them. I'll freeze this and see. Did you want to take one?
Yeah.
Remember this?
Anyway, back to Vietnam. Do any of you have any questions about Vietnam that I might be able to? Yeah.
Well, this might not be about Vietnam, but why is it called the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier?
Because there's more than one soldier buried there, I believe. Three. And they don't know the name. They don't know the name. Yeah, there was 4, but they found out the identity of one of them, so they exhumed him and put him in probably Arlington.
Yeah, he's buried in Arlington.
Yeah. Unloads combat supplies and caches them, what they call caches them, which is put them in a big pile, and the people that own them come pick them up. If they can't pick them up, then we delivered them. So we got the call to go to Vietnam. I was over there 10 and a half or 11 months. We unloaded combat supplies for the combat troops. You need to understand that in the Army or in the Navy or anywhere else, when you're in the military, for every man that's out there fighting in the field, you've got about 8 people that are supporting that person, giving them food, shelter, uniforms, weapons, bullets. All these guys would be in a heck of a shape. All these guys would be in a heck of a shape if they're out there firing and they haven't gotten any bullets, right? Or they don't have the helmet to wear on their head to protect them. So it's important to understand that not everybody was military, or not combat.
Frontline soldiers.
Yeah, not frontline soldiers. So, but given that, the war in Vietnam and Korea too was a very different war in the fact that there was no front line. Because imagine this: you're at this school tonight by yourself, or maybe a small group. You walk down this dark hall, and all of a sudden somebody or several people come out and start beating you with a ball bat. You didn't see them. All of a sudden they appeared. They're there. They hit you, and they disappear into the darkness. That's the way the North Vietnamese fought that war. And it was a tough war because we didn't know how to fight that kind of a war. And Korea was kind of the same way, but not quite that bad. The fighting going on in Iraq and Afghanistan today is a lot like that. You've heard of the roadside bombs, right? The IEDs. That's the same thing. You're driving a truck down the road and all of a sudden, boom, you hit a landmine and it blows your truck up. Well, we encountered that in Vietnam. There's certain things we had to be really careful, many things we had to be very careful with. You didn't ever buy a Coke or get a Coke from anybody there in Vietnam because they'd lace it with acid. You didn't take any ice from anybody because they put glass in it. And not all the time, but it's been known to happen. I did personally witness a thing one day where a small Vietnamese child came up and handed one of our guards something. And when he opened his hand, it was a grenade, and the pin popped. Well, you have about 5 seconds to get rid of that grenade. It's going to go off. Well, fortunately for us, the guard saw the guy that handed the grenade to the guy, so he threw it. And the guy was jumping on his little motorcycle or bike, or I don't remember. Threw it, and he hit him and blew him up. And all our people. So it was a very different war. So I don't.
And him talking about that, my son landed at Ton Son Air Base the day of Tet.
Ooh, wow.
He landed in the morning. He had no experience whatsoever. Tet started that night. That was a massive invasion that the North Koreans pulled off. He tells the story that the next morning, the barber who had been cutting their hair was found dead between the barracks with a North Korean rifle. He was a member of the North Korean Army at the time. He was cutting their hair. So you see, they didn't know who was the enemy and who was
Yeah, it was
not.
hard to tell the difference. So they all looked alike, and they all spoke pretty much, I mean, to us, spoke pretty much the same language. So it was really difficult to tell. In fact, we were not allowed to go into town for, I think, about the first 3 months we were in Quin Yon because it was too hostile a territory. But after that, they kind of eased up a little bit. So in the afternoons, you could go into town if you were off from your job, and we would go into town and we'd ride what they call a rickshaw. Anybody seen those rickshaws where they got two wheels in the front, I think, and one in the back, and they pedal. The guy pedals and you're sitting in a little seat in front of him. Well, it's a known fact that most of those guys were North Vietnamese, and they'd listen to your conversation. So if two of you were driving along, or there was two in one rickshaw, well, where are you going to go tomorrow? Well, we're going up to so-and-so and do this. And they would give that information back to their leaders. So you had to be very careful what you said to those around those guys, because a lot of them were they were North Vietnamese. Do I have any questions? Because we're running out of time, I think.
You said you were on Maui. Okay. Did you come across the town of Macawao? It was halfway up the volcano.
I can't.
That's what we would say. Did you go to Hana?
I don't know. Oh, over the buttons. Are you talking about the buttons? No, I don't think he just brought them. Yeah, I guess he could. Do you want him to show them? They've got to go.
54 between Haiku and Hana. I traveled there when it was just nothing but dirt. The scout car, I managed to get a ride with the chaplain driver, and we went to Hana on the dirt road. Now it's paved. Those 54 bridges are all made. I got that right. Took my wife back in 1985 to Maui to show her where I was. It had changed so much I couldn't believe it. One more thing I'd like to tell you. See this? That's me. This is our post. And it says all state posts. We get that for doing what we're doing today. We're going out and talking to people, talking to different people, doing community service. That's what our primary goal is with our DFW post here in town. Is community service.
Okay.
So this year we've done an all-state post. But we're all proud of it. We all got shirts with our post number and our name on the right-hand side. Bill's got one. He didn't wear it.
Two of them.
Have you got one yet?
He will. After lunch?
We're gonna eat someday, right?
Yeah, I'm eating one.
Okay. All right. I think we're pretty. Are you?
More questions? We've got about 5 minutes or so. My voice is back. I'll try and answer some.
There you go.
You had your hand up a long time.
Is he a VFW?
Just joined.
Just joined last night.
Panama. Well, we went over to Panama now. Panama back in 1987.
Oh.
Yeah, huh? Can you talk up real loud?
How could you tell between the, like, how you said about the bartender, how could, is there any way you could tell if they were, like, clean?
You mean tell the difference between who you were with and who, because we used a lot of the South Vietnamese people as labor. You know, they would help us. And, but it was a known fact that you didn't buddy up with any of them because you never knew. You never really knew if they were real friends. But a lot of times, it's not because they didn't like us. It's because the North Vietnamese said, if you don't help us at night fight the Americans, we're going to come in and we're going to kill your family. You know, and there's been documented proof that they would go into a hamlet and they would actually murder women that were pregnant just to make a point to prove that they were serious about what they were talking about. So you just never buddied up with him. You never become friends with any of them because you never knew.
Point of information, the war he's talking about in Vietnam was a jungle type warfare, if I recall, where World War II, it was an open battle in Europe. You had tanks, you had airplanes, you had men with rifles and all that moving forward, trying to push the Germans back out of the area. In the Pacific, where I was, it was strictly an island hopping war out there. We had to take an island and then decide which next one we wanted. We would take it and then decide which the next one would be. We didn't take every island. We would just take what we needed, and once we got between the Japanese and their supply bases, it just dried up. They couldn't fight anymore because they wasn't getting any supplies. So we would island hop out across the Pacific to cut off their supply line.
What is that?
Oh, yeah.
This is a Iwo Jima Memorial. That is the largest bronze memorial in the world. Those men, I think from here to here is something like 31 feet. That's how tall it is. The memorial itself is, stand back, you have to raise your head back to look at the top of it. But it is the largest cast bronze memorial in the world. I think that was me standing right at the bottom of it. That was an awesome feeling to stand there and think of all of those young boys that were killed in that war.
Okay. 2 more questions, then we got to quit. Yeah.
Why is there more than one Marine
You're right. They are Marines.
putting the flag?
The Battle of Iwo Jima, for which this is famous, was fought by 3 Marine divisions. 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. There were some elements of the 5th in, but the major battle was fought by those 3 Marine divisions. I think that's the only major battle that the Marines fought. The rest of it would be a combination of Army and Marine.
Okay. Just young lady over here. Can you speak up? Well, because we were the enemy to them. You know, we went over there and tried to. The whole Vietnam War was all about democracy. We saw that the communists were taking over South Vietnam, so we went over there, right, wrong, or indifferent. We went over there and tried to help the South Vietnamese people. And the people who didn't like us, then they were going to fight us any way they could. And the way that they fought us was the hit and run tactic that I just told you about, and then doing mean things like we were talking about earlier. You know.
In that same vein, why did we fight World War II?
Same thing.
Germans were trying to take over the world from the east side. The Japanese were trying to take it over from the west side. I was in the group that were trying to keep the Japanese from moving in on this country and taking it over. I had a brother who made D-Day in Normandy. They were trying to keep the Germans from advancing and taking us over from the east side.
I think we're pretty much done. We're out of time.